Okay, so we're back. I apologize about that. But he talks about accidental predators, the difference between those and actual true predators. So he's got quite a few pages about that. And one more tip right here. He, he talks more about his tips here. These tips are all throughout this book here. Moving on to the next chapter of chapter 11 for weather. One thing I'd like to point out is he talks about ways to predict weather and interpret weather signs. For instance, local guidance, barometers, wind patterns. He talks about clouds. One thing I never knew about was the fireside smoke, and then also the sky. I never knew anything about that either. And then also the clouds I didn't know about. Also, he talks about the dangerous weather. For instance, hurricanes. If you're, all of these are if you're in a survival situation. He talks about what to do if you're in a hurricane or a thunderstorm, lightning storm, blizzards, and wind chill, and sandstorms right up here. And then another thing that's throughout this entire book is he has region specific dangers and hazards. I think I already said that, but in case I didn't, a lot of chapters talk about those towards the end. And it also, has a lot of great information about those. And then moving on to the chapter 12 on clothing, one thing I'd like to point out here is on right here, on the clothing, he talks about whether you should go traditional or high-tech gear. He talks about like Gore-Tex, wool, cotton, canvas-like materials, and when clothing kills, and about keeping it dry. And then he stresses that extra is always better, which I agree with. Another thing here is again, it talks about the regional of what clothing you should have. Moving on to chapter 13 here. This is a great information right here. For instance, if I can find it here. So he talks about major and minor injuries, like major injuries and illnesses like dehydration, hypothermia, frostbite. One thing I like about here, for instance, for hypothermia, he talks about how to handle the situation if somebody has hypothermia. I'm not going to go ahead and read them off here, but he talks about how to do that. He does the same thing also for frostbite, which is a really good thing here about these. So, and then he talks about shock and burns, all the major things like joint injuries and fractures, which is a good thing here. Heat exhaustion, stroke, bleeding, and then he goes into the minor injuries and illnesses, and he talks about these. And a lot of the things he's saying is, even though they are minor at the time, you should always fix them so they don't become major. For instance, blisters on your feet, bites and stings, things like that. Moving on to the next chapter here, he even talks about, like I said, about blisters and diarrhea. It also talks about the snake bite, which I think is very useful because there's a few snakes around for where I live. It talks about what to do. And then on chapter 14 here, the essential survival skills, on you know, it talks about like twisting rope and how to make natural cordage. The thing I like right here is even in the, he talks about 3 different knots: the clove hitch, the figure 8, and double figure 8. And this is the clove hitch right here. But then the clove hitch talks about how to do those there. And then the figure 8 talks about, you know, kind of how to do them. So, and it talks about making knives through rocks and all that there. And then on a few of these, I think there's about 3 chapters or so, it talks about group versus solo survival, the benefits of having a group with you or the lack of them, the pros and cons basically of having a group. Food was one that talked about the pros and cons of solo versus group. And then moving on to the last chapter here, one thing I enjoy is, for one, he talks about an instance that he had, that there's a lady, or I think it was a lady or an individual that yeah, it was a lady that he had to go see in New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, and well, because of all the devastation, luckily his GPS still was able to take him exactly where he needed to go. But the dangers and hazards, he talks about, and this is inside your house. This is the only chapter that actually talks about being inside your house, at your location, rather than being out in the woods or in the jungle or anything like that. This is the only chapter about that. He talks about gas, glass, fire, and wire, for things to look at and check. Go ahead and so that was a good thing to know about. And then after that, he's got the author's note. And one thing that I think is really nice to have, if you do have this book in your bug out bag or whatever kind of bag you have, this last paragraph right here, he's talking specifically to you, the individual that's stuck, or that's lost or needing to survive. So I hope you can see that and read that. So he's specifically talking to that individual. And then the checklists, these are pretty nice. It talks about like a personal survival kit checklist, things to use, and then complete survival kit checklist, and then a vehicle survival kit checklist, and then a first aid kit checklist, home survival kit checklist, and these are really nice to know about. And then home survival checklist again, and then other useful items, and then the acknowledgements. And so the entire book is about, and then the last page talks about the author. There's 362 pages. And then one last thing I'd like to point out is, this is just the index here, but you have 1, 2, 3, 4 pages of nothing but fire starter. So that's my review of the book Les Stroud, or the book Survive: Essential Skills and Tactics to Get You Out of Anywhere Alive by Les Stroud. And you know, like I said, I would recommend getting this book if you haven't already got it, because it is a great read. It's got a lot of useful information. So I hope you all enjoyed, and I do apologize if that was kind of a long video there. This is my first time ever doing a book review, and so I hope you all enjoyed. And once again, this is Montana Bushcraft bringing another video, and I hope you all have a nice day now, and take care.